shortly introduce her. Dr. Lige is an assistant professor from the College of Home Economics, University of the Philippines, and she obtained her doctoral degree in international studies with a special focus on development-related issues from the Graduate School of International Studies, Ewha Women's University, Seoul, South Korea. She was a recipient of the Higher Education ASEAN Talent HEAT Scholarship Program coordinated by the Korea Council for University Education and funded by the ASEAN Korea Cooperation Fund. She is also trained in teacher education and curriculum development for her bachelor's and master's degree. She is currently teaching undergrad and graduate classes on subject areas such as resource management, sustainable development, and curriculum instruction. So let us listen to Dr. Lige first.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So I'll be sharing with you my dissertation entitled Filipino Diaspora Engagement, Analyzing the Approach of the Government in Migration and Development. This is the outline of my 30-minute presentation where I've included the important details and main points in each of these sections. Now, I won't be able to cover everything about my thesis, so if you have questions, maybe we can cover them during the Q&A later. So let's begin. In 2019, an article entitled "The HR Department of the World" was published by The Atlantic and stated, "No country has worked harder than the Philippines to export its people, and no people have proved more eager to go." I wanted to start with this quote because it encapsulates how the Philippines has become one of the world's biggest migrant-sending countries. In 2006, the government reported that over 1 million Filipinos migrated. And in 2013, the country reached another milestone where it recorded more than 10 million Filipinos abroad, and that's approximately 10% of the population at the time. There seems to be no slowing down as the number of Filipino migrants is projected to increase further based on a recent survey that found 1 in 5 Filipinos seek to go abroad. Now, the size of the Filipino diaspora is further magnified by the massive remittances received by the country, where it collected $35 billion in 2021 and $36.1 billion by the end of 2022. And last year, the World Bank reported the Philippines as the 4th largest recipient of remittances, which stood at about $40 billion. Now, historically, the inflows since the 1970s have been on an upward trend, even during challenging times such as the financial crisis in the late 90s and the recent pandemic. And when comparing the massive remittances of the country with its other foreign financial inflows, such as the Official Development Assistance, or ODA, and the Foreign Direct Investments, or FDI, the disparity is even more glaring. Remittances as a percentage of the GDP have averaged 10% in the past 2 decades, which is well above the other financial sources. When this is further compared with the other ASEAN migrant-sending countries, the scale of the Philippines' remittances is on a different level than the rest, which makes the country really quite unique in terms of how it is kind of the odd one out in its region. Now, although Filipinos migrated since the early 1900s, the crucial period in Philippine migration history was in the 1970s, during the time of President Ferdinand Marcos Sr., where he institutionalized migration as one of the pivotal solutions to addressing the country's economic challenges. It was supposed to be a temporary solution, but the results were seen by the succeeding administrations as positive and promising for the country's development. And so each leader contributed to building a comprehensive migration governance. In fact, in 1988, President Corazon Aquino called Filipino migrants Bagong Bayani, which means modern-day hero or heroine in English, because of their sacrifices in leaving their families and contributing to the nation. Given this, the past 5 decades saw the expansion of migration in the country, resulting in a phenomenon called migration culture, which refers to how it has become pervasive and ingrained in society. Now, there are several puzzles in this. First, how the state successfully perpetuated migration's significance in the country's bid for development remains to be fully understood. Is institutionalized migration the reason for the migration culture? According to scholars, migration policies and programs are rarely effective on their own in delivering their preferred results, as is the case with many government policies. Therefore, something else must have propelled it. So, what is that stronger force behind it? Second, this conundrum is even more fascinating because the Philippines, since the 1980s, is still a struggling lower middle income country, marred with deep-rooted and persistent inequality, while its neighbors have surpassed development milestones. Therefore, the question remains about what the country has to show after about 5 decades of state-supported movement of its people in the name of development. When citizens leave, taking their knowledge and skills elsewhere while the country continues to struggle, yet the state actively promotes the exit of its people, then there seems to be a different reality from which the state operates. And finally, research by prominent migration scholars caution against optimism toward migration for development. However, the Philippine government chose a completely different position, where migration has become integral in its quest for development. And so when we look at the research landscape, current migration and development literature tends to be geared towards specific outputs, for example, volume of remittances in relation to development markers, but not so much on the inputs and the throughputs, meaning the ideals and processes that answer the whys and the hows of how a state views and its actions toward using migration for development. Diaspora engagement is one of the concepts that delves deep into input and throughput. It broadly refers to institutionalized policies and programs set by the state to interact with the diaspora, to maintain and strengthen their ties to the origin country and extract contributions. It is an input because it is founded on the state's beliefs and goals concerning instrumentalizing migration for development. And it is also a throughput or a process because it consists of tools and strategies carried out by the state. Therefore, it is imperative to understand those perceptions or ideals and examine the strategies or approaches of the state to help evaluate diaspora engagement's impact on development. So as evidenced by limited studies presented that I found in the literature review, there is no clear understanding of the approaches of the state. Further, there is still a dearth in this area where the complexities attached to identity, membership, and role perceptions of the state toward the diaspora have yet to be deeply analyzed. Therefore, this research fills these knowledge gaps. Now, the Philippines stands as a nation with almost half a century of interminable and enthusiastic migration governance. According to the 2024 World Migration Report, the country ranks first in the ASEAN region and ninth worldwide. The fact that the Philippines trails behind big economies such as China, Mexico, and India in these rankings draws wonder and confusion. Therefore, the questions that guided this research are: how has the Philippine government perpetuated and maintained migration as a tool for development? Why did it result in a migration culture? And how have the state's diaspora engagement efforts impacted or supported development? 3 theoretical perspectives served as lenses and were chosen based on their suitability and explanatory power. First is the theory of philosopher Michel Foucault. He theorized the concept of government, power, and control in his theory Governmentality. Though he never mentioned how his ideas relate specifically to migration and development, there has been a growing body of research that used his studies as the foundational lens from which analysis was done. Most cited his governmentality theory in several migration studies that included inquiries into investigating humanitarian efforts toward refugees, constructing migrant illegalities, determining citizenship, and theorizing border mobilities. These and other migration scholars have recognized that Foucault's governmentality proved valuable as an explanatory framework for migration issues because it explains that the site of power is kept within the state but works from a distance. So there is this concept called distant governance, which refers to the state's structures and processes that include subtle ways of guiding, influencing, and shaping a subject beyond the limits of territorial power. Therefore, this theory fits perfectly in this study. On the other hand, frame theory is another suitable lens related to governmentality. It is one of the ways in which the state's perceptions and actions may be understood to support the analysis of distant governance through diaspora engagement, because framing involves selecting certain features or messages and making these more salient than others. And finally, this theory is supported by Gamlen's proposed 3 theoretical perspectives of tapping, embracing, and governing to help understand the state's perceptions and actions toward the place of migration in development. So in summary, the analytical framework of this study explains how diaspora engagement is carried out through distant governance. This is reflected in the process called responsibilization, where the state exercises covert extraterritorial power over the diaspora. Therefore, the investigation of the first strategy frames, meaning the techniques employed by the state in facilitating development partnership with the diaspora, and second, the identity frames, meaning the characteristics bequeathed by the state on the diaspora is reflected in its various engagement effort is carried out. Now, the data used in this qualitative research are publicly available official documents obtained from websites and publications of 6 diaspora engagement programs of the government. The results and discussions of this research are presented in 3 different parts to reflect the different stages of analysis. So the first stage is the examination of the strategies for partnering with the Filipino diaspora in all of the 6 diaspora engagement programs. So the different programs were examined through qualitative, deductive, thematic analysis using NVivo 12+ software. The second stage is a closer examination of one of those diaspora engagement programs, which is the Presidential Award System, that uncovered the identities of the Filipino diaspora promoted by the government. Analysis of the 580 narrative data of the government officials and winners of this award system from 1991 to 2021 was done using mixed methods. First is text mining and topic modeling, specifically the method called latent Dirichlet allocation done through the R software, followed by a qualitative inductive thematic analysis. And the results of stage 1 and stage 2 analysis support the stage 3, which is the assessment of the overall impact of the diaspora engagement of the Philippine government towards development. So the diaspora engagement assessment in this research followed a qualitative approach using the diaspora engagement model for development. So the methods align and tie well with the analytical framework of the study, and this will become more apparent in the discussion of the results later. And so with that, I'll be presenting the analysis following the 3 research questions. So first, how has the Philippine government successfully perpetuated and maintained migration as a tool for development? The state's distant governance was employed through the embracing strategy, where the Filipino diaspora in its engagement programs were embraced, so to speak, quite tightly. The state bestows and celebrates the enduring quote-unquote Filipino-ness of the migrants, stating that wherever they may be, the government is there to support their departure and welcome their return, which enforces and reinforces long-distance nationalism and ethnic identity. This is an interesting display of authority by the state, and that extends to Filipinos abroad because it is hinged on feel-good embracing tactic. To give some examples, here is an excerpt from President Fidel Ramos in 1993. He said, "Our country prides itself as a source of many of the industrialized nation's talented and skilled manpower. we can proudly claim that we have helped many great nations into pursuing their initiatives because our human resources have unselfishly stood by them in pursuit of their vision and growth for development. 3 decades later, current President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. rolled out this campaign on the United Kingdom buses, the one that you see here on your screen, showing a Filipino nurse who gave the first COVID vaccine. In my data analysis, I uncovered these identities of the Filipino diaspora promoted by the state. And all of this coincide with the campaigns and programs of the state. So this shows how, until now, the state unabashedly embraces the diaspora and claims their contribution abroad. Why? Well, because every Filipino is part of the nation, according to the state, as if to say their efforts are our efforts. So their sacrifices are our sacrifices, therefore their triumphs are also our triumphs. Indeed, as we see here in the slogan on the bus, it says there, we give the world our best, the Philippines. So this fantasy of a whole nation and an enduring national identity may be imagined, but it does not matter if there is that pull of such an idea of being embraced and praised, despite leaving the country. And that pull is supported by how most migrants often feel alienated in foreign lands, so a state that readily accepts them, despite moving away, provides a sense of home and identity for them. The framing of long-distance nationalism and ethnic identity serves as a distant governance mechanism that legitimizes authority over the diaspora, which in turn supports extracting contributions from them as observed in the tapping approach. So this strategy clearly defined where and how contributions to the nation may be sent by the diaspora, but these are channeled through official means directed to specific development areas that the government already identified. The partnership with the Filipino diaspora was described in quite an interesting way, where quote-unquote masters and servants can become partners to build a better future for this nation. So going back to the theories that guided this study, this shows that engaging with the diaspora is through saying that the work of nation building is the task of every Filipino, which the state reminds overseas Filipinos. Give back and help your fellow people or kababayan. Now for the second research question, why did the state's utilization of migration as a tool for development result in a migration culture? The mechanisms used by the state through its engagement strategies and promoted identities of the diaspora resulted in a migration culture because, according to frame theory, framing disregards reality. Because the process is based on manufacturing a narrative, making it more meaningful to the audience. So how did this Philippine government do this? The data analysis revealed that the state utilized the following Filipino cultural virtues. So first is loob, or core being, meaning our identity as Filipinos, where we show our innermost self through our kapwa, or shared identity, because we are never just individuals. Instead, we share who we are with other people, and this is reflected in how we act towards others, where the concept of bayanihan, or working together, is the prominent virtue of the Philippine society. So this word comes from the root word bayani, where bayan means nation and bayani means hero or heroine. And finally, the concept of utang na loob, or debt of gratitude, which the state invokes on Filipinos overseas on how they were supported by the government in their departure to seek greener pastures abroad. Therefore, they should repay the debt of gratitude to the Philippines and to the Philippine government by helping those back home. So the use of Filipino culture and identity invokes familiarity and nostalgia, which is ingrained in the Filipino consciousness, making the framing process subtle and natural. And now moving to the third research question, how have the state's diaspora engagement efforts impacted development? Now, given how the state used Filipino culture and identity in promoting embracing and tapping the diaspora for development, overall, the Philippine government is assessed to be fairly successful in its efforts. The state's engagement efforts allowed numerous households to improve their socioeconomic standing and communities to thrive. Further, the state's efforts to channel resources to specific developmental concerns received considerable attention and support from overseas Filipinos, as seen in this slide of the different development programs where the diaspora contributed. However, there are still several issues in this. First, the flow of these contributions is not equitable across all regions in the country. As seen here in the map of the Philippines showing the rate of migration nationwide, there are certain regions within the country with the greatest concentration of migrants. And so these are also the places where most of the resources are sent. Additionally, more go to the urban rather than the rural areas. Therefore, this shows an unbalanced and disparate picture of where development contributions go. This shows that those in great need of development assistance are rarely the receivers of collective remittances. Therefore, diaspora engagement may indeed be life-changing for the receiving households and remittances for the communities and families, but at the macro level, the changes are unlikely to be seen given the uneven flow of assistance in the origin country. Second, the remittances have been highlighted as development financing sources. However, the over-reliance of the state on the high volumes of remittances is a weakness because it shows the country is unable to be domestically productive. So President Rodrigo Duterte in 2019 said to the diaspora, "We need you, I call on you, take part in nation building, make your country proud." And here's the title of a story that CNN ran in 2020, illustrating how millions of Filipinos are separated because they need to work to support their families, and the domestic market cannot accommodate them. This situation may be viewed as the Philippines' version of the Dutch disease because exporting human resources has become its comparative advantage, which rendered its other industries and sectors not as desirable, making migration sort of a prime tool to generate not only household income, but also national income. Further, the United Nations Development Program reported the Philippines may have improved in terms of Human Development Index score, so it's currently at 0.699, around that number, or 0.7, which is a quite medium human development. However, the country's political, social, and economic environment is still not good, especially its deep-rooted corruption. Therefore, the potential for the positive impacts of migration is ultimately hindered by structural issues of the country that migration cannot address. So this study was able to reveal a more specific understanding and analysis of this phenomenon's subtleties. So the strong force behind the perpetuation and maintenance of migration as a tool for development is the state's utilization of Filipino culture and identity in its diaspora engagement efforts. This is the vital, yet largely unnoticed ingredient in the country's migration culture. Further, migration for development is not working the way the government is promoting it to function, yet instead of taking a step back and reassessing migration policies and programs, the state's narrative around it is strengthened even more. Therefore, the Philippines might have reached a point of no return where, regardless of whether the country achieves its development goals or not, migration will continue to be a part of the people's way of life. As such, this study revealed that what the Philippine government has done in the past half-century is a sophisticated migration and development narrative hinged on strong Filipino cultural virtues that essentially allowed the system to be self-sustaining despite the lack of obvious and remarkable impacts on the nation's overall development. And so looking at the theoretical contributions of this study, it provides an extension of theories So this research finds governing as the overarching theory or strategy, where some form of migration governance needs to be in place if the state hopes to engage with the diaspora for development through distant governance. Therefore, it is logically the bigger umbrella approach. And under distant governance, responsibilizing emerged as a higher order and distinct strategy of the state in engaging with the diaspora. In the data analysis, 4 interesting features emerged that fall under a more nuanced understanding and detailed breakdown of how responsibilizing may work. And this is a revelation and one of the major contributions of this study in terms of theoretical insights on distant governance using diaspora engagement. So this research discovered that this is carried out using a positive image projection of migration and migrants' role in development. These programs also contain strong human interests that elicit good feelings toward the migration phenomenon, such as messages of hope and triumph. Commendation is also integral in the programs where the sacrifices and contributions of the diaspora do not go unnoticed. And finally, the government provides indirect instructions to the diaspora to do their part for the development of the nation. And all of these are supported by the second one, which is the one nation narrative through the embracing strategy. So this is held together by the strong cultural cues that allow the diaspora freedom of conduct while the state maintains authority. So ultimately, this process comes off as natural, and so the control mechanism is not obvious. Therefore, this approach lends validity to the state's extraterritorial authority, where the extraction of obligations and resources is legitimized as seen in the third approach, which is tapping. Now, aside from the offered theoretical contributions, this study offers some recommendations based on the results of the diaspora engagement assessment. First, diaspora engagement should be planned in consultation with the diaspora, asking them how they see their role in development and what can be done to help materialize their vision through programs that are designed with their input. This way, the diaspora is truly a partner and co-creator of efforts aimed at strengthening their potential contributions for development. Second, the government needs to create a diaspora-friendly environment where the encouragement of more contributions from the diaspora is simultaneously supported with improvements in domestic issues so that migration could make a bigger impact on development, aside from improving the lives of remittance-receiving households. And third, in addition, given the results of this study that showed the force behind the country's ingrained migration is the reinforced Filipino identity and culture within the diaspora, which may have indeed worked in perpetuating the state's narrative, but this does not reflect the perspectives and experiences of the diaspora. The focus now, therefore, should be on the clear understanding of the diaspora and its multiplicities. Overseas Filipinos may, in varying degrees, identify themselves as Filipinos and hold affinity to the country, but this is not their only identity and loyalty. And finally, for future research, it is just as important to look at the other side, the side of the diaspora. How do they see their contributions to development of the origin country and their identity? Examining these conceptions and notions will open avenues for renewed and hopefully better understanding of the diaspora and their role in development. And so that ends my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Aurora. So we have listened to her presentation, which is actually based on her PhD dissertation. So we have a few minutes left for any questions or comments. So we can accommodate some of your questions on YouTube live or from this Zoom meeting room. So would anyone like to raise a question or comment? Everyone's free to join us. If nobody, so I
Can
will
I?
start. Yes.
Yeah,
Let us welcome Dr. Kim.
because nobody active now. So thank you for your very interesting presentation and congratulations on your successful PhD research, Dr. Aurora. And I think
Thank you
it's
very
very
much,
interesting,
Professor
but
Kim.
there's some question. I mean, when it comes to evaluation of uh, the government's engagement in actually use the migration as a tools for the development. So I think that is kind of the government strategies and then framing. So to evaluate it, I think the research could benefit if you have a kind of the voice of the diaspora. How do they actually perceive and feel that about that the projected image and the framing from the government. Secondly, actually, when we going to evaluate the success of this engagement, it has been used for that tools for the development, but as a result, the Philippines as a whole in general, the development is the still very relevant goal to be achieved. In that sense, how you can define that criteria for the assessing the development. It is the development of the countries and development of the community and individual level and so on. So I think this kind of the methods can be extended to somehow theoretical discuss as well, whether it is neoliberal labor export methods or still it is the remain a matter of the state developmental goals as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, for your inputs. Yeah, definitely. Because I had limited time, so I was only during my PhD, I was only able to do it from the side of the government. That's why I looked at it from their diaspora engagement programs. And I agree 100% that it's also very much important to see how this kind of images, how do the diaspora kind of perceive and do they accept, do they agree that they are this kind of heroes and heroines, or maybe they just don't care. They decided to migrate for so plenty of reasons, but not really thinking about, oh, I'm going to be a hero in my own country. And even if they do send, let's say, collective remittances back home, did they really think that this is their way of like helping in this grand development scheme of the government? So most definitely, Professor, this is something that I do want to look into in the future as an extension of my research. And then your other comment about sort of the definition of development. This is also something that I thought about when I was doing my PhD, because of course, when we study development, especially in our area in development cooperation, the definition of development alone is it's a very murky area. It's not very clear. And the definition that's going around, just like the definition of sustainable development, is something that is based on a very specific kind of perspective that may not necessarily be the kind of development that we see in certain areas. For example, in developing countries such as the Philippines, do we really see development as this kind of a bigger scale, or because we are a developing country, lower middle income country, development might actually must be defined at the level of the families, the communities, not even yet at the level of the nation, because the issues are still very much there at the low levels. So I do agree that part of the extension of this research might be looking at what development means, especially in relation to migration and development, in the scenario that the Philippines is in, because we may be using the government may be looking at it from a very big, broad, grand perspective of what development looks like. But on the ground level, at the grassroots level, the people do not really see it that way. Maybe to them, development is just me being able to live day to day, or me being able to just get on with life. And that's already what it looks like for me to feel like I am progressing as a person, as a citizen in the Philippines. So I think that's also definitely a very important thing that we can look into, Professor. Thank you very much for those comments.
Okay, thank you so much for the question and the response. We can also ask other audience or presenters if there's any question from the meeting room. Yeah, I think what Dr. Kim asked is what I was thinking also, but since you also mentioned the fantasy, right, of the whole nation is really depending on this remittance and economic development, I think it's really important to look at how you also define Filipino-ness, because when we see the a certain nation or a certain cultural background, it's also important not to be very essentialist, right? What do you think, Dr. Aurora?
Yeah, so interesting, Professor Bay, because when I did this research, I didn't expect that I will go into the aspect of Filipino culture and identity. That wasn't something that I sort of was expecting when I got the data, and that will be kind of the backbone of how the government did their diaspora engagement. So when I realized, oh my God, I'm veering towards Filipino identity and culture in understanding this a bit more. And so I started to dig deep into like the foundational books and articles about Filipino identity and our culture. Like I started reading about kapwa, bayanihan, and all these very specific kind of nuances in Filipino culture. But I do agree that we also have to be careful with this kind of essentialism kind of perspective and really define Filipino-ness, especially that if I consider looking at it from the perspective of, because my data generally, it's not historical research per se, but because the diaspora engagement program spanned from the 1980s to the present, so kind of the definition or how being a Filipino is defined may not necessarily be just a single thing. Yes, we do have some cultural identities and virtues that are still intact, but how they are expressed by the migrants and by the people, it might be already different. So then it is also important to kind of question that Filipino-ness that we're looking into. And that's something I think, Professor, that I can delve deeper into because I will be extending this research. I recently got a grant related to my dissertation that then I can extend this work and dig deeper in terms of this one. And I'll definitely take note of what you said about defining Filipino-ness and looking at it from the perspective that is not just very much ingrained into what we already know, but what we probably still don't know or what we don't know yet, especially with the changing times. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for your kind response. I think we can expect the progress in this research. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, so let us start with our main presenters' presentations today. So today, the first part, we have three presenters. So let me introduce our first presenter, Krista Lucy Martinot from Yonsei University. And then her research presentation is entitled Sovereignty and the International Reconciliation Nexus, Historical Revisionism, International Vulnerability in Germany and Japan. So let us meet Krista.
Hello, everybody. So I will present you my paper on Germany and Japan and their reconciliation during the Second World War and after. So this year we will be celebrating the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. Since 1945, the international system has changed and new norms have emerged with the creation of the United Nations. States have multiplied their diplomatic and cooperation ties. Despite all of these changes, the grievance of the war still weighed on the relations between East Asian countries. On the contrary, Europe countries have become closer and moved on within the European integration. This leads us to a central question. Why do differences in international reconciliation exist between Japan and Germany? While answering this question, the study also aims to understand how do differences in sovereignty shape historical revisionism and reconciliation. We approach this through a comparative analysis of reconciliation dynamics. Within the existing research, Germany and Japan are central cases when it comes to represent the differences of outcomes between reconciliation processes in Europe and East Asia. Through the existing research, scholars have presented reconciliation not simply as a moral imperative, but also as a strategic tool. Reconciliation is strongly affected by apologies, collective memories of survivors, and national historical narratives. However, because of the unique characteristics of each conflict, there is no universal model of reconciliation. And despite this extensive literature, there is an important gap that we aim to fill with this research. This gap is the role of sovereignty as a key factor when it comes to shaping reconciliation processes. So what is sovereignty? Sovereignty based on the Westphalian model is a multi-dimensional ability of a state to exercise control over its territory. It shapes how a state manages historical narratives, but also engage in reconciliation processes. It is a central topic of contemporary debates, such as globalization, where the main question is, does globalization reduce or transform state authority? Or over debates such as the concept of conditional sovereignty, where weaker states often trade autonomy for security within alliances. So the conceptual framework within this research is we defend the theory that the level of sovereignty of a nation affects the level of revisionism and the external vulnerability. And this layer affect the outcomes of reconciliation processes, make it durable or fragile. As we said earlier, sovereignty is a multi-dimensional process. So it has a military dimension, which corresponds to a state capacity to ensure its internal security and defend itself against external threats, while maintaining a monopoly on legitimate use of force. It has an economic dimension, which corresponds to a state control of national resources and autonomy over its economic policies. And finally, there is a diplomatic dimension, which corresponds to a state's ability to be recognized by its peers and form its own foreign policies. These are the three dimensions that we use in the study to evaluate the sovereignty level of both Germany and Japan. As you can see in this table, we determined that Germany has a moderate military sovereignty, a strong economic sovereignty, a strong diplomatic sovereignty. However, Japan has a weak military sovereignty, a strong economic sovereignty, and a moderate diplomatic sovereignty. In terms of Germany, let's focus on Germany first. So its military sovereignty is moderate because it was reestablished under the NATO's creation, and the Article 9 of its constitution post-World War II and authorized the military, but also this military mainly contributes to the European security. Germany's economic sovereignty is strong because it was supported by the Marshall Plan, And the state's economy recovery led to an independence and stability, which turned Germany into an economic powerhouse and one of the top economic powers in the European system. Finally, its diplomatic sovereignty is also strong because through treaties like the Elysee Treaty, Germany formed strong and durable reconciliation with France and later shared a strong decisive power within the European Union. For Japan, the military sovereignty is weak because the Article 9 of its constitution post-World War II renounces to war, and which lead to the state to strongly rely on the US for its security and creates external vulnerability. Concerning its economic sovereignty, yes, it is strong. It has led to a miracle in terms of recovery after the Second World War. However, this economic miracle strongly relied on imports, which create external vulnerabilities too. In terms of diplomatic sovereignty, it is moderate because there is a state effort to normalize relations with South Korea, but is challenged by unsolved historical controversy and the victim consciousness developed after the war because of the atomic bombings. This difference in sovereignty level led to different outcomes in terms of reconciliation. The relations between France and Germany rely on a low revisionism supported by an effective management of historical narratives and accountability from Germany over past wrongdoings done during the occupation, the German occupation of France, and a low vulnerability for Germany concerning external vulnerability. Indeed, the state secured a strong economic and military and diplomatic positions within the European construction, which led to be more stable and have more stable relations with its neighbors, among which France. This led to a durable reconciliation with France. And today, the Franco-German couple, as we call it, is a relations that is a guarantee of lasting peace and cooperation within the European Union. Concerning the relations between South Korea and Japan, it relies on a high revisionism supported by continuous debates over historical narratives on the topics such as the comfort woman, forced labor, or Dokdo Island for the Korea, or Takeshima for the Japanese, and the revisionist tendency of the Japanese government. We might think about the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and its revisionism concerning the Constitution of Japan. South Korea and Japan also rely on a high external vulnerability of Japan, which is supported by the country's reliance on the US when it comes to its military and also its economy in some ways. Japan's strong reaction towards external criticism over its historical issues. This led to a fragile reconciliation with South Korea, and the ongoing disputes over the past, but also over territorial disputes, keeps undermining the reconciliation between the two countries. So in conclusion, post-conflict sovereignty significantly impacts reconciliation processes by shaping historical narrative and external vulnerability of countries. While Germany's strong sovereignty fosters durable reconciliation, Japan's weaker sovereignty hampers its efforts with South Korea. However, despite this analysis, East Asia requires a tailored approach to reconciliation, which will take into account its unique historical complexity, notably related to the Japanese colonization. So it will be wrong to think that we could just replicate the European model to form a successful reconciliation within the East Asian countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Krista, for very interesting and very timely topic. Thank you. So we will meet you again later during the open forum. So let us meet our second presenter from Yonsei University, Vipavi Tongsuk. Her presentation is entitled The Impact of Localized Strategy in Battling Climate Change, a Case of Thailand's Carbon Crediting Mechanism. So Vipavi, let us meet our second presenter.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I enjoyed everyone's presentation. I am and I am doing a master's degree in international relations at Yonsei University Mirae Campus. And today I will be presenting a case study in my country, which is about the impact of localized strategy in battling climate change with a case of Thailand's carbon crediting mechanism. This is a study that I co-author with Professor Yonsei, and I hope that you will get useful insights from my study. So I will start off with a brief background, and then I will introduce you to my argument related to the top-down and bottom-up approach. Then I will demonstrate my argument through my case study on a program in Thailand called TVER, and then I will end it with my conclusion. So what my paper focuses on is on the carbon crediting mechanism. For those who don't know about carbon crediting mechanism, it is a mechanism that converts emission reduction to credits. So in today's world, we have many mechanisms to battle with the climate change, and this mechanism is one of the very popular ones that is used widely in today's world. For example, or the company or maybe a government agency or anyone they may use some kind of technology, or they might plant more trees. And by that, they can reduce or remove the greenhouse gas emissions. So usually if they reduce or remove 1 ton of greenhouse gas emission or carbon emissions, they will earn credits from that. So by doing this, they will get more and more credits, and they can trade it in the carbon market. So that is why it is called carbon crediting, because by reducing or removing the carbon emission or the greenhouse gas emission, you get the credits from it. So carbon crediting mechanism has been used with many strategies. And one of the strategies that people have emphasized that it will increase the effectiveness of carbon crediting mechanism is the local participation. Because the local stakeholders, local communities, they possess valuable knowledge for climate adaptation and mitigation. And it has been proven many times that involving the local stakeholders, local communities in the process have positive impact on climate initiatives. So that leads to another point, which is about the top-down and bottom-up approach. So there has always been a debate on whether we should use the top-down approach, where we have the centralized control, the government control everything, because it does have some pros, because it has been found to be effective in promoting carbon reduction, especially in an economically diverse region. But some people say the bottom-up approach is better, where we focus on having the local engagement, having the locals manage the climate initiatives in general. And it also allows for tailored solutions, which we can adapt with local context, and it fosters innovation and cooperation. So that leads to my argument, which is that a two-way approach between the central government agency and locals, or in easy words, the combination between the top-down and bottom-up approach, can increase the likelihood of achieving the goals of the TVER projects, which is my case study. So in easy words, I'm not saying that the top-down approach is better or the bottom-up approach is better, but the combination between the two of them can contribute positively to the climate initiatives. So I will demonstrate my argument with the TVER program. So the TVER program is a Thailand voluntary emission reduction program, which was developed by Thailand Greenhouse Gas Management Organization, or the TGO. Basically, it is Thailand's carbon crediting program. It uses carbon crediting mechanism, and it is voluntary. So anyone, any agency, any businesses, they can participate to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and they will receive the carbon credits from it, and they can trade it in our domestic carbon market in Thailand. So the reason why this program is interesting because it utilizes a very localized approach which combines both the top-down support and the bottom-up approach. So this is how the TIVR works, which has both the combination of the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach. So I will go through each one by one quickly. So we have the TGO here, which is the organization that established the TIVR. So the TGO, it is a public organization under Thai government. So according to Thai law, it has the autonomy to manage the carbon crediting mechanism because it was specifically established for this purpose. And it has always been the key actor in carbon crediting mechanism in Thailand. Because we don't only have the TIVR programs, but we have many more programs where the TGO has always been the key actor, the main actor who manages the projects. So therefore, the TGO, it has the autonomy and influence to shape the local participation practice in Thailand. So for that reason, it is able to enable the feedback loop that can include the local stakeholders into the TIVR projects. So in doing that, they do two main things that help facilitate this feedback loop, which is facilitate the local understanding of the program and develop a project design that encourage the local participation. So by facilitating local understanding of the program, two main things that they do is that they remove the language barrier and facilitate the understanding of carbon crediting and the program overall, because the TIVR documents are all in Thai and all technical terms are translated and explained with context. Because carbon crediting mechanism or climate mechanism overall, they are very technical. And most information at the very first, it was mostly in English or the prominent languages like Chinese, Spanish. So by removing the language barrier, it is able to enhance connection and engagement to the communities, especially the local communities in Thailand where they don't really speak English. And most of us speak Thai and a lot of people speak in dialects. And another important thing that TTO does is they collaborate with specialized agencies. For example, they collaborate with agencies that specialize in hill tribes. So they collaborate with this kind of agencies, this kind of institutions, and they visit the villages that speak in dialects or speak in totally different languages, and they explain to them for them to be able to understand about carbon crediting, about the program overall, and how they can contribute to the projects. Another thing that the TGO does is they develop a project design that encourage the local participation. So TIVR, it does not mandate local participation, but rather it encourages it through the project report. So the project developers, the people who participate in the TIVR program, they must submit a report which has a local participation checklist, and that checklist is not mandatory. But at the same time, it is encouraged because it is provided with guidelines of how to do local participations. So this kind of method, it preserves the project participants' freedom of choice, but at the same time, it has the subtle encouragement. Like if you do it, it would be good. It will increase the higher chance of having the project registered into the TIVR program. So this is like a technique that can be called like softly nudging the project participants to include the local participation rather than like hardly pushing them or force them to do it. And this kind of strategy has been proven that it is very effective in encouraging the citizens to follow the policies that they intend for them to do. So by TGO doing these two things, they kind of enable the feedback loop that the local stakeholders can provide a feedback back to the TIVR program. So by that, the local stakeholders are able to provide the feedback through the local participation that was encouraged by the TGO. And for this part, I want to see how the local participation contribute to the projects overall. So I collect all the reports on the checklist of local participation that I talked about earlier. It has this 4 checklists. So the projects that did all of this checklist, they did all of this local participation, they can check it in the report and they send it for the project to get submitted. So I collected all of these reports of 111 energy projects in Tiber from 2013 to 2024. And then I compared the real emission reduction to the expected emission reduction in each project. Because in each project, before they do the project overall, they will have the expected emission reduction, where it is like a target or the goal that they would reduce this amount of greenhouse gas emission. So some projects, they can achieve that target, but some projects don't. So then I use the fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis, or the QCA analysis, to see how each local participation approach on the checklist that was provided by the TGO, how do they contribute to the Tiber project's achievement of expected emission reduction? And the result that I found was really interesting, because I found that the project that established the local coordination center that received the feedback from the local communities, they are 80% more likely to achieve the targeted greenhouse gas emission reduction. And more specifically, projects that do all of these 3 things, which is establishing local coordination center, conducting engagement activities like meetings, surveys among the local communities, and reaching out to local communities to talk about the projects. The projects that do all of these 3 things, they are 83% more likely to achieve targeted greenhouse gas emission reduction. So this is how, like, these 3 things that are encouraged by the TGO, it enabled the local stakeholder to provide the feedback to the Tiber projects. And this is how the Tiber works. So we have the support from the top-down, support from the TGO, which they enable the feedback loop, and the local stakeholders, they are able to provide the feedback, which is the bottom-up approach. So we can see here there is the combination of the top-down and bottom-up approach in these Tiber programs, and it contributed very meaningfully, very significantly to the Tiber projects overall. So that comes to my conclusion that top-down and bottom-up approach increases the likelihood of achieving the goal of Tiber projects, and the local participation with the top-down support helps facilitate a feedback loop to enhance the implementation of the Tiber. So I think this study is very applicable to countries that are in very similar contexts with Thailand, which is the ASEAN countries, including the Philippines as well. Because the ASEAN countries, we have a very different, compared to other countries, we have different contexts in terms of politics, economics, ecological context as well. So I think this study will be applicable to many ASEAN countries. And I hope this study, this conclusion will give you some useful insights. And that is it for my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for very comprehensive presentation, Vipavi. And I think during the open forum, you can also add some other information. So let's meet our third group from the Philippines this time. So we will meet Kiana Ramores and Maxine Sia from the University of Santo Tomas. And the presentation is entitled From Tradition to Taboo, Analyzing the Role of Human Society International Korea in Shifting South Korea's Attitude Toward the Dog Meat Industry. So Kiana and Maxine, you're ready.
Good evening to our event host, the UP Korea Research Center, our guests from the Yonsei University Mirae Campus, our fellow presenters, and to our audience. I'm Maxine Sia with my partner, Kiana Ramores, and we are 4th-year students from the University of Santo Tomas, presenting our paper entitled From Tradition to Taboo, Analyzing the Role of Humane Society International Korea in Shifting South Korea's Attitude Towards the Dog Meat Industry.
Animal welfare is a concept that focuses on the well-being of animals, considering their living and dying conditions, including where they are kept, killed, or treated by humans. However, it varies based on the economic, religious, and cultural experiences, leading to varying welfare levels. Fraser of 2008 suggested a need for a specific definition to initiate international cooperation and establish a global animal protection system. Scholars and animal welfare scientists support this argument, stating that institutions should collaborate in establishing a precise definition of animal welfare, as the well-being of animals is crucial and important.
NGOs who play a significant role in public policy through lobbying and advocacy can be considered as providers of issue-specific expertise, given that they have the capacity to affect the process of norm implementation. These NGOs are pivotal players in any society, as they have been seeking answers to global issues, particularly the issues that government bodies do not address, through community mobilization and research. Focusing more on what the study is about, the study focuses on analyzing the dynamics of NGOs and the legislative power of the government through the Humane Society International Korea's advocacy against dog meat consumption and its contribution to the implementation of the Anti-Dog Meat Bill of 2027 in South Korea. The practice of dog meat consumption has been present in various countries across Asia, including Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and the Philippines. While the said countries were able to proclaim that the dog meat industry is illegal, the industry in countries such as Vietnam, China, and South Korea still remains prevalent. To narrow it down, South Korea specifically has a long history of consuming dog meat, which has been considered a cultural and historical custom, as dog meat became an option for protein back when the country was under economic slumps, making dog meat as the fourth most consumed meat in the country after pork, beef, and chicken.
However, the 1988 Seoul Olympics faced controversy due to English animal rights activists criticizing the Korean tradition of eating dogs. This led to a boycott and a ban on dog meat soup sales. Conflict arose as some considered the cultural custom as animal abuse. However, public awareness of animal cruelty has increased, challenging the Korean tradition. In literature concerning NGOs, NGOs plays a crucial role in South Korea's policy and legislative matters, enforcing advocacies and regulation through public interest proceedings and proactive legislative approaches. The Humane Society International and its South Korean branch have been working to end dog meat industry, which has gained attention. After decades of debate, the Korean government has decided to address the issue through a proposed bill by the People's Power Party, which will take effect by 2027, making the breeding, slaughtering, and selling of dog meat for human consumption illegal, highlighting the role of NGOs, particularly the Humane Society International Korea.
However, with the lack of literature and research specifically on the role of NGOs in promoting norms concerning animal welfare in the South Korean context, and the necessity to adopt methods to address animal welfare issues, this study aims to find out how campaigns by animal welfare organizations, particularly the Humane Society International Korea's anti-dog meat campaign, contributed to the passing of the Anti-Dog Meat Bill of 2027, to venture more on how the relationship of NGOs as norm entrepreneurs and governments as the actors who allow norm internalization provide solutions such as laws that will contribute to the betterment of the nation. Moving on to the chosen theoretical framework, the norm life cycle theory by Martha Finmore and Catherine Sickink was utilized, given that it focuses on empirical studies concerning social building processes and norm implications in international and national politics. In each stage of this theory, namely the norm emergence and tipping point, the norm cascading, and the norm internalization, was applied in the conceptual framework to address the post-research questions, which will be discussed next in the presentation and discussion of the collected data.
First, the norm emergence up to the tipping point of the issue. The spread of the anti-dog meat campaign by the Humane Society International across Asia and the adoption in South Korea. In this stage, HSI served as the norm entrepreneur who aims to promote animal welfare and campaigns to end animal cruelty, which initiates the establishment of a standard definition of what animal welfare is and encourage various countries in Asia, particularly South Korea, to end dog meat industry and have a different perspective towards the issue. On the other hand, HSIK serve as the organizational platform, which has the same advocacy and supports the norm entrepreneur in its campaign against dog meat industry, leading to the tipping point where the organizations carry out the same advocacy as HSIK across the country. In line with this, HSI function and work is not limited to its main branch in the United States, but it has also reached different parts of the world, putting emphasis on the need to end dog meat industry in Asia. This has greatly contributed to the advocacy of various animal welfare organizations in South Korea, as they were able to work with Korean animal defense organizations such as the Yongin Animal Care Association, Korean Canine Rescue, Life, and the local authorities. With this established, HSIK has adopted the efforts of the HSI and launched campaigns to put an end to dog meat farming and promoted animal welfare through policy changes and legislative campaigns in the country since 2015, when they embarked on several efforts in relation to animal welfare, especially relating to dog meat consumption.
One of these efforts include the Models for Change program that was initiated in 2015, where closing operations of dog farms took place and a switch from dog meat farming to other forms of humane livelihood was encouraged. Those who were eager to leave the industry easily cooperated in handing over the surviving dogs to the organization, which in return, the farmers were provided support to change their forms of livelihood. From 2015 to 2023, this initiative has led to the shutdown of 28 dog farms under the efforts of HSIK and various local animal welfare organizations. Exhibits were also held to increase public and political support on ending the dog meat industry in South Korea. For one, HSIK, Animal Welfare Forum, and the members of the National Assembly hosted an exhibit in the South Korea National Assembly entitled Beyond Prejudice for the passage of a dog meat ban bill last July 10, 2023, where animal welfare violations and the societal case of banning the breeding, killing, and selling of dog and its meat for human consumption were discussed. With these established, it is evident that the HSIK has done such collaborative efforts to be able to work on broader campaigns to create solutions and encourage more South Koreans to change their perception on the selling and consumption of dog meat.
Second, the norm cascading, the response of the South Korean society, including lawmakers, to the anti-dog meat campaign by the Humane Society International Korea. In this stage, minimal normative changes have been made, where the new norm acceptance rate is rapidly increasing, having no local pressure for change. With a goal of inducing norm breakers to become norm followers, with the minimal normative changes that happen through the programs and the campaign done by the HSIK, the acknowledgement and acceptance of the new norm and the gaining of attention of their cause on ending dog meat industry in this case are now evident. In 2018, former President Moon Jae-in has issued a Blue House pledge urging the removal of dogs from the legal definition of livestock, which followed a petition submitted by HSIK along with its partners such as KARA, which gathered 1 million signatures, hinting a political support on the anti-dog meat campaign, which was followed by another remark by former President last 2021, stating that there might be a need to ban the consumption of dog meat in the country amidst the growing awareness on animal rights.
However, dog meat was still being eaten mainly by older people in some restaurants and markets. One of the most significant surveys concerning the dog meat industry was conducted by the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, entitled Survey on the Breeding and Distribution of Dogs for Consumption in 2022, which determined that there were 1,156 farms that breed dogs for human consumption, whereas a total of 521,121 dogs were raised in the said farms. Furthermore, in the same survey, it was stated that an estimated total of 388,000 dogs were transferred to slaughterhouses every year that were sold to a total of 1,666 restaurants selling dog meat, implying that they were still operating dog meat farms and restaurants serving dog meat in 2020. In addition, a survey commissioned by HSIK conducted by Nielsen Korea entitled 2023 Dog Meat Consumption and Attitude Survey showed that 86%, a vast majority of South Koreans, expressed having little to no intentions of eating dog meat in the future, regardless whether they have consumed dog meat in the past. Moreover, a majority of respondents at 57% supported a legislative ban on the dog meat industry, with 65% of respondents expecting an end to the industry in 2 years. Most of the respondents had concerns on animal cruelty and unsanitary conditions on dog meat farms as a reason for their support.
And finally, the norm internalization. The effects of the actions done by the Humane Society International Korea that influenced the passing of the Anti-Dog Meat Bill of 2027 in South Korea. In the final stage, the adopted norm is now internalized by actors where institutionalization usually occurs. This is evident with the high acceptance of HSIK's advocacy, given that the majority of the South Korean society has accepted and shifted their attitudes towards dog meat consumption, as seen in the previously mentioned surveys, with the majority of the respondents having no plans on consuming dog meat and a significant number of people supporting its ban. In line with this, the legislative response is also evident, with the Korean National Assembly putting out legislative proposal, with one being the Special Bill number 24280, aiming to prohibit dog meat consumption, which was proposed by Representative Ang Byung-il and 9 other members of People's Power Party. Evidently, the organization's initiatives and awareness-raising campaigns helped the bill pass, leading to the government's confirmation on the bill and the introduction of 3-year phase-out period to give dog farmers ample time to adjust and shift to different form of livelihood, and will take effect by 2027.
Following the norm life cycle theory, this study was able to analyze and establish how the Humane Society International, along with its South Korean branch, contributed to the shift in the attitude of the South Korean society towards the cruel dog meat industry. In the first stage, HSI served as a norm entrepreneur who introduced the idea that pushes for an end to the dog meat industry, and HSIK as the organizational platform that adopted the said idea. This was followed by the increased awareness and acceptance of the norm in the second stage. And finally, the internalization of the norm as seen in the last stage of the theory, where the Anti-Dog Meat Bill of 2027 has been passed.
To conclude, corresponding to the Anti-Dog Meat Bill of 2027, the significant role of non-governmental organizations or NGOs, the Humane Society International Korea in this case was observed, showing how NGOs are able to influence policy and legislative matters in South Korea, as they have been participating actively in law and in policy and lawmaking processes through public proceedings and proactive legislative approaches, as seen in HSIK's anti-dog meat campaign.
Moreover, the rapport between state and non-state actors was evidently established in this study, as despite the fact that the practice of consuming dog meat has been a long-standing debate in South Korea, both parties was able to address a distressing issue that once affected the South Korean society, as well as its culture and practices, through active cooperation and establishing effective tactics, such as dog farm closing operations in exchange for support by HSIK and the South Korean government to the farmers to switch to a more humane form of livelihood, as observed in their Models for Change program. To end the presentation, this study is expected to shed light on the role of NGOs in animal welfare and how it is able to hold ground on the legislative branch of the South Korean government. And that would be all for our presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kiana and Maxine, for your presentation. So the first part of Open Forum, perhaps the first presenters, Krista, Vipavi, and Kiana, Maxine, maybe you can also turn on your camera so you can see each other on the screen, and we can also have some questions from our audience. So we had 3 presentations with the researchers from Korea and the Philippines, and then aside from where they are from, we also listened to certain particular countries' cases, such as Thailand, Germany, and Japan. So if anyone has a question, let's listen to our audience, and then you can also feel free to answer. Any questions or comments?
I have a comment, right? Thank you for a great presentation. Let me get your Kiana, right? Kiana and Maxine. I think the dog industry, I'm actually interested in researching on that topic as well. So your research topic was very timely and it was very insightful. One of the things that I would like to comment, yes, there was a norm emergence. Yes, it could be partially right to apply the norm cycle, life cycle theory, but at the same time, the norm was there long time ago from the 88 Olympics. The government wanted to shut down dog meat industry or dog meat restaurants, right? But it did not happen. But something happened in domestic politics or the domestic society. The atmosphere has been changes a lot since then in 80s. So for instance, a lot of Koreans have dogs as a pets, right? So that is something that is a change that you did not really include in your research. So when the norm is there, but then in order for that norm to penetrate some kind of society with a strong cultural values, something has to happen at a domestic level. So if you can combine those elements to your theoretical framework or an analytic framework, I think the story will be very strong and more persuasive to the audience. So that's my comments. But great job.
Right.
Yes, Dr. Kim.
Right. So I agree with also first of all, thank you for very wonderful presentation. All of you, I think, have made great research, and I agree with Professor Song what you mentioned. So actually, the Kiana's the research is based on the norm theory, right? It seems that assume that it's kind of the norm adoption. So that means the localization norms from the outside. So in order to deal with that kind of theoretical framework, as Professor Song has mentioned, that you have to deal with the responsives from the local actors and the state, the government's response as well. But you have to also look at whether really there is indigenous norms has emerged in Korea as well. So not the norm has diffused to Korea and finally Korea to adopt through that activity of the norm entrepreneurs. So I mean, you can consider those things to find that your theoretical frameworks as well. So if you allow Dr. Bae, so I'd like to also have some comment to other presenters. Is it okay?
Yes, of course.
Krista, so I think you have mentioned that somehow important than historical issues, but not only historical, but the currently important international issues. But my concern is that the use of the terminology of the reconciliation. So actually, reconciliation is inherently reciprocal concept. But when it comes to historical context, so Japan and Korea, it's not in the symmetrical relation in terms of the powers and some other methods. So I think using the terminologies, the reconciliation, it seems to that take a kind of risk on that moral matters, or sometimes it shift burden on side of the victim rather than the what I call that perpetrators like the Japan. So especially in the historical context between Japan and South Korea. So actually to use the terminology of the reconciliation, I think there must be a kind of the precondition that is the justice and truth. So when you take an example of the South Africa and then even in Korea, when they deal with that historical tragedies, they set a kind of the committee for reconciliation, but not only reconciliation, that is the justice and truth and reconciliation. So without having truth and then truth apologies, then it is not fair to use the term of the reconciliation. So I think that is the very Western-oriented approaches and their terminology. it can be used for the relation between U.S. and Soviet Union, and it's kind of the third party's the perspective when they look at that relationship between Korea and Japan and other the historical issue related to countries' relation. But somehow also your theoretical framework. So I think the sovereignty, it seems to be that you consider as a kind of the fixed variable rather than the historically contingent construct, which can be shaped by the domestic and international force and so on. So I think it seems to be the oversimplified in terms of the theoretical frameworks. So, all right. So I have some other comment, but for others, let me stop now here. Thank you.
Yes, you can add more later, Dr. Kim. Dr. Aurora as well.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Bai. Thank you to the students who presented their work, very interesting papers and studies. So I'll just share my comments. I have a similar comment as Professor Song for Kiana and Maxine. While the norm life cycle is a very interesting and very useful tool in analyzing how certain ideas kind of get ingrained in a society, especially if we're thinking about certain changes in how we deal with certain issues in society. So for example, dog meat consumption. I think it's very important to also to go outside of the who is kind of influencing the norms creation, emergence, and then how it cascades, because that's not the only thing that is kind of in action when we're talking about norms. So while there is, let's say, a certain group, so for example, in this case, the HSIK, which is your case, so normally, of course, you will focus on it, but try not to zero in on much on this one and step back a bit and look at the bigger picture, the bigger context, like what Professor Song said earlier. Because, for example, in Korea, yes, there is now a big prevalence of how pets and dogs are now kind of become part of family. So how does that affect the dog meat industry, for example? So because one of my question here is, what do you think was unique with how the HSIK was able to influence the change? Because with how you presented it, you focus on how HSIK kind of influenced in a big way this change in the dog meat industry. But when I look at what they did, I was wondering, it's quite similar with how other NGOs work. But as we all know, the NGOs work, they're not always successful. They do campaigns, they do advocacy, they go out, they talk to legislators and all these things, but it's not always successful. So my question to you before Professor Song talked earlier was, what did you see was unique with how HSIK did it? If it's quite unclear to you exactly what's different with how they did it, maybe that is already a clue for you that it's not just the work of the HSIK, but kind of the context around this phenomenon that you're looking at. So that's something to look into. So that's for my comment for Kiana and Maxine. For Krista, that was very interesting. I wanted to kind of ask you, because what you said earlier was that in your abstract as well, you said something about how the European model is not very useful when we kind of compare, especially difference in history, difference in situations. My question to you is, do you have an idea of what other framework or model, just kind of not very specifically, but are you already kind of do you have an idea of what might work for the East Asian situation in this topic about historical revisionism? And then with that question, I would just like to add, I didn't know the term, but I heard Professor Kim said the term justice earlier, because what I think is what is important with kind of comparing the situation of Germany and France and Korea and Japan is what exactly transpired between these nations? Like what led them to kind of have these issues? Because we are looking at quite different situations, because you have the colonizer and the colonized, or the perpetrator and the victim. So Professor Kim said something about justice. So I think that will definitely be very important to delve deeper into on what transpired, and that will point to why it's not, aside from contextualization, why it's not right to use the European model, or to kind of put that framework into the East Asian perspective, because of what transpired is very much different. Yeah, so that's my comment for Chrisem. And then for Vipani, I think overall what you are looking into with how you said kind of combining the top-down approach and the bottom-up approach is kind of veering towards the multi-stakeholder partnership. So how the government partners with NGOs and with the public, with experts, for example. So I think that's something, I mean, if I don't know if you have published this paper or something, or if you would like to publish this, multi-stakeholder partnership, I think, is something worth looking into, because what you said earlier about the feedback and how top-down, though, gets a negative connotation because it's very controlling. People see it as controlling, but actually we do need the top-down, because that is where we get guidance in terms of general policies and in terms of what can be done, but the contextualization and the localization happens with the bottom-up approach. So I think this is something that you can look into further, multi-stakeholder partnership. Yeah. And thank you for pointing out that, because we have similar situations with the Philippines, at the very local level, it's very different. You go to different regions and it's very different. The language is different, the culture is very different, but we're all within the same country. That's why it's very difficult for any kind of effort to take place if we're just going to be focused on what did the government want us to say. The government want us to have emissions kind of programs, but then at the local level, that will look very different. Yeah, so those are my comments. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Ms. Talon.
Thanks for you guys' presentation. Actually, I have some question to Kiana and Maxine, and it's not kind of question, it's my opinion. Actually, the seriousness of related social problems continue to exist in the bill on the prohibition of dog meat, because as I remember, at that time, the media and public voices related to animal abuse were increasing. So I think this topic is more directly related to Korea's democracy and petition system than to the relationship between state and non-state actor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Talon. So to wrap up the open forum, maybe each of the presenters, if you have a response, you can also quickly respond to the questions and comments. Krista or Maxine and Kiana or Vifabi, do you have any responses?
Thank you so much for the comment from Aurora. I think that is a very interesting point, and I just would like to add up on that you just said about how the top down is necessary in our context, and I would like to add, because that's also what I'm trying to say as well, and I really appreciate that you point that out too, because in our ASEAN context we can see that we are very localized countries. We have many different regions, different languages. So that's why I say that it's very applicable, and maybe my conclusion is generalizable in ASEAN countries. Because we have this kind of context. So just like you said, the top-down approach has actually it has quite negative connotation, but that is my study. What I'm trying to show is that the top-down approach is can be necessary in the context in this context as well. So thank you so much for your suggestion, and I hope I'm also working on this paper as well, and I would like to study more on the multi-stakeholder that you suggested as well. So thank you so much for your comments. Thank you.
Okay, Maxine? Kiana, yes.
Thank you so much for your insights. The change in domestic attitude relating due to the caring of dogs as a pets in South Korea, as well as the other internal origins of animal welfare practice in the said country. I think we will consider this as well to provide another dimension to our discussion, especially in the aspects of norm internalization, where there needs to be acceptance locally. Thank you so much.
Also, I would like to add to address Miss Aurora's question. We saw that the role of the Humane Society in International Korea in more recent times was really important in pushing for more awareness. Of course, considering that they were more vocal, they had a more vocal government attitude against dog meat consumption, which is why we chose the organization.
Okay, Krista, you have any response?
Thank you for your comments. So, the comment on the term of reconciliation is based on the academic process tracing of reconciliation based on the conflict itself and the ongoing post-conflict situation on the country. So maybe it's a question of perspective. On our perspective, we base ourselves on existing literatures and how Japan and Germany are often compared in terms of reconciliation based on their crimes during the Second World War and what happened after with their former enemies. What model should be considered for East Asia? This is a really good question. Sadly, my thesis, the paper does not really focus on which model should be applied to the case of Japan and Korea. More like we believe within this study that with more sovereignty, Japan will be able to have more says in its reconciliation process or in getting closer to South Korea. So what we try to say in this topic is that the relation between Japan and Korea will be better or be improved if Japan recovers more sovereignty, especially from the US, for example, or over maybe its economic or military. So this is what we try to show. Thank you.
Thank you for presenters and your responses as well. So let us just begin the second set of presentations immediately. So we have 4 more presentations from now on. So the first one, we will welcome Ms. Daeun Kim from Yonsei University, and her presentation is entitled Approved to Join Timor-Leste ASEAN. So Daeun can just start from now.
Right. Can you guys show me this slide? Oh, can I start now? Can you guys?
Yes,
Go
go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Daeun Kim, and I'm glad to be able to interact and communicate here. And I'm studying ASEAN, especially Timor-Leste, and this is part of a field research plan for the Korea ASEAN Centers project foster new scholars. So my research topic is a study on the domestic drivers influencing Timor-Leste's promotion of ASEAN membership. So let's start to my presentation. So the purpose of this study is to analyze the context of ASEAN membership promotion and the process of forming nation identity through domestic motives and interests of ASEAN members promotion. Briefly, Timor-Leste became independent from Indonesia in 2002 and joined the ASEAN regional forum in 2005. It also signed the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation in Southeast Asia in 2007. After that, Timor-Leste officially applied for ASEAN membership in 2011. After that, in 2022, the three major ASEAN communities were observed, and as a result, approval for ASEAN members was completed in principle. So my research question is, why does Timor-Leste want to join ASEAN? Timor-Leste is the least developed countries, and many scholars are skeptical of joining ASEAN due to Timor-Leste's internal administrative and economic capabilities. Second, what is the key factor that lead to Timor-Leste approval of ASEAN membership? And I found a research gap. I think limitation of exacting research focused on ASEAN expansion, and many scholars mention about economic and administrative capacity of Timor-Leste. Even there's not so many scholars who study Timor-Leste. So my research can be contributing to expand and understanding of Timor-Leste's domestic factors and ASEAN integration. I read some papers, and these are directly related to my research. So I want to introduce three authors, Science, String, and Minji Yu. They analyze Timor-Leste's push to join ASEAN with a focus on constructivist theory that values identity and norms. But Hein is establishing a diplomatic strategy for Timor-Leste to secure national identity and legitimacy after independence. And Stratting also analyzes Timor-Leste's accession to ASEAN from the perspective of national identity, acceptance of ASEAN norms, and regionalism. Especially Minji Yu, she is the only scholar in Korea who is studying Timor-Leste as a single case as a hybrid research method. Based on an inductive approach and positivism, this research method reflected a local perspective that was difficult to confirm with exacting theories. That's why I'm going to try to build work if I get a chance. So my research method is single case study and field work. If I can do this, I'm going to interview the major actors in Timor-Leste. So single case study is to understand the context of the discussion process for promoting ASEAN membership. And I can follow the process, the interactions and interest of major domestic actors. Also, this research requires field work because I conduct multi-level analysis and focus interview. And if I go to Timor-Leste and do field work, I can be a research tool because I must respect their life. So that is very important to do and make my identity too. So I want to interview two people as representatives. First, Mirna Maria da Costa Ranger, who is Vice Minister for ASEAN Affairs. The Deputy Minister for ASEAN Affairs assists the Minister of Foreign Affairs and cooperation in the performance of his duties. Second, Blaise dos Santos Freitas. He is responsible for the design and approved by the Council of Ministers for the areas of foreign policy and international cooperation. But I'm not sure that I can do the interview. So, importantly, I aim to cooperate with Lauhamutuk. Lauhamutuk is an independent research institution and NGO center in Timor-Leste. They have a mass of data and network. So if I cooperate with them, I can do this interview. Especially, they play a role in connecting government and civil society. So these are my short research plan. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dawn. I think this is also very timely topic, which is also discussed quite a lot in the Philippine setting. So let us listen to Dawn later more. So we will welcome the second presenter of the second set. Yu Jung Lee is also from Yonsei University, and her presentation is entitled "What is Successful Red Plus? Comparing NGO and state-led cases in Cambodia." So Yu Jung, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Thank you, Professor. Okay. Before I begin, thank you for giving us great opportunity to UP Korea Research Center and Yonsei University. Now I'm a little nervous, but I hope you will enjoy my presentation. So my title is that What is Successful Red Plus? Comparing NGO and state-led cases in Cambodia. Sorry. Can you see my screen? Okay, I'll briefly introduce my background, the background and research review in the case study. So what is the RED Plus? As someone knows, RED Plus is an acronym of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. This mechanism is based on the performance compensation to prevent forest damage and deforestation in developing countries that are not obligated to reduce greenhouse gases positively. According to the IPCC Special Report on Climate Change and Land, the activities of agriculture, forestry, and other land use account for 23% of total net anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. There are some realistic limitations, which are lack of sufficient finance, institutional support, and agreement of regional society, and etc. As you can see the figure, there are 5 activities of RED+. They are starting with the reducing emission from deforestation and degradation. Next is conservation of forest carbon stocks and sustainable management of forests. The ultimate goal is to achieve enhancement of forest carbon stocks. These are the mechanism and framework of the RED+. For instance, Global North support for some finance and technology to protect the forest, and then Global South or NGO conduct the actions for the 5 activities as I mentioned. While they are doing the RED+ activities, the investigation agency comes there and they measure, report, and verify RED+ activities. And the outcomes going to be the reduction of carbon emissions. So they means Global North, Global South, or NGOs can trade these carbon emissions with Global North. So these called the REDD+ regime. So regarding literature review, I divided two main streams of the factors in the limits of REDD+. Equity issues. Since REDD+ is a proxy-based structure, differences in perception of equity among stakeholders and the complexity of property rights distribution must be resolved. And other scholars say that local participants should guarantee local communities' tenure rights and incentive coordination because these are the main key motivation for local residents to participate. Second mainstream is about effectiveness of REDD+. Some scholars argue with decision-making process. The effective mechanism must be triggered through democratic participation, which means locals have the right in the decision-making process. In addition, from socio-political structure of the recipient country, it also explains that even if developed countries provide continuous funding, the effectiveness of REDD+ varies depending on the political corruption in the recipient country. So I think about what the definition of successful REDD+ is. The ultimate goal of REDD+ framework from the 5 action plans is to achieve the enhancement of forest carbon stocks to reduce carbon dioxide. So I think I define the successful REDD+ is defined by whether carbon trading is active or not. So I bring the 2 cases. One is about Kiyosema REDD+ project led by WCS, they are NGO. And another one is about Tamling REDD+ project led by Korean government. The reason I choose Cambodia REDD+ project is that they are one of the most active sites among the Asia-Pacific regions where the REDD+ is implemented under the global environmental regime. So as you can see the table, the key factors are actors and CO2 reduction per hectare, carbon credit trading partners, and supervisor. As I mentioned, Kiyosema's main actor is WCS NGO, and Tamling is Korean government. And the CO2 reduction per hectare is about 70 tons per hectare of Kiyosema. But in the Tamling project, it is approximately 15 tons per hectare. It's quite over 4 times of Kiyosema one is over 4 times of Tamling one. So I think this is the interesting point about carbon credit trading partners. So Kiyosema has 3 levels of trading partners, which is government and international organizations and private. Government includes like USAID or Japan and Norwegian and French. And international organization is such as the UN REDD program. And private means the Walt Disney Company. And in the Tamling project, there's no exact data available, but I can guess this trading partner is Korea. That's because this contract is intergovernmental contract, so that's why I can assume this is the Korea. And Kiyosema's supervisor is WCS themselves, and Tamling project supervisor is FA of Cambodia. So these mechanism and framework of REDD+ by WCS, for instance, USAID or WCS supports some financial support or technology to NGO, and then WCS can act for REDD+ activities. While they are doing that, investigation agency can measure, report, and verify REDD+ activities. And there are some carbon emissions, right? And then they can trade with government and international organizations and private the buyers. And then the buyers can contribute to the NDC contribution. So another important thing is about the how they divide the profit. 80% of profit goes to WCS themselves to resolve the process of RED Plus or to explode their area. And 20% of profit goes to FA of Cambodia. And WCS also mentioned some part of profit goes to USA just because they are based on the USA. So these are the mechanism of WCS. So regarding conclusion, the reason WCS was able to actively trade carbon credits is because they specify trade partners at the state, international organization, and corporate levels. This means, firstly, the governance structure is a bit lighter than the government structure during the process. Secondly, the NGO can prevent corruption in advance by monitoring the funding as a supervisor. And regarding implications, these articles suggest the methodology for whether the NGO governance structure is more suitable for effective process as a mechanism for RED Plus, rather than who takes the lead or simply implementing funding. So also this article has limitations that it's necessary to compare more diverse cases of state and NGO for generalizing this case. In addition, the information on the exact amount traded is not easily accessible because it's quite sensitive information with every actor. So thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the open forum.
Thank you very much, Yu Jung. It's interesting to see how international relations students are into climate and the preservation related topics. So thank you. Later, you can also say more things about your research. So let us meet the next presenter. Next presenter is meeting us from Korea. Maud Bilal is currently studying his MA studies in the Academy of Korean Studies. His presentation is entitled K-pop, Youth and Political Change, the New Phase of Activism in South Korea. So Maud, you can go ahead.
Hello, a very good evening to everyone. Can you hear me all?
Yes, very well.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you, Professor, for giving me this opportunity. So my today's presentation title is K-pop, Youth and Political Change, the New Phase of Activism in South Korea. So due to the time limit, I will keep my points very concise, but I am to provide a comprehensive overview of this intersection. The immediate backdrop of this research is the significant political turbulence South Korea has witnessed recently, and it was during the intense public demonstrations surrounding the K-pop events, particularly those led by young people, and that K-pop culture emerged not just as an entertainment, but as a powerful symbol and tool for political expression and mobilization. So my presentation will explore how K-pop, its music and its fan culture became central to this new wave of activism reshaping South Korea's protest landscape. So let's first begin with the introduction. In the history of South Korea, Korean democratization, expressing political anger within a vibrant concert-like atmosphere is relatively a new phenomenon. From the 1980s through the early 2000s, protesters would often sing Minjunggayo or people's song to voice their opinion and build solidarity. These songs primarily rooted in the folk music of the 70s and 80s, including famous anthems like March of the Beloved, Imal Vihan Hangjingkok, Yangon's Morning Doe, Achim Isil, Evergreen's Sangroksu, and The Wilderness by artists like An Chi Hwan and Kim Hwan Sok. This tradition of musical protest is part of South Korea's deep legacy of resistance. South Korea has a long and powerful history of public mobilization, stretching from the resistance during the colonial era to democratic struggles like the Gwangjo uprising in 1980s. The historical background of activism now confronts the modern turmoil. The recent political crisis significantly deepened by the President Yoon Suk Yeol's martial law declaration last December and the subsequent impeachment proceedings. And amidst this recent upheaval, a new soundtrack of dissent has clearly emerged. K-pop fandom, bringing its characteristics, energy, globally recognized music, dedicated fan chants, and iconic light sticks have vividly redefined the protest culture today. So therefore, this presentation focuses on exploring how K-pop made this leap. We'll examine how it became such a potent vehicle for political expression, effectively transforming rallies into these dynamic concert-like acts of redefense, particularly for younger generations. Moving towards, this slides highlights the visual and atmospheric evolution of large-scale protests in South Korea over the past decade. Let's first look back at 2016 and the candlelight protest. The clear target then was the impeachment of President Park Geun-hye. As the name suggests, and as you can see here, the defining symbol was the candle. It represented a quiet, undefined power, millions gathered, holding these small flames. The atmosphere was generally quiet, somber, reflecting the serious political situation and intensely determined. Now let's contrast that with the images from the protests late last year in 2014. Here, the immediate target was the response of the martial law declaration and the push of President Yoon's impeachment. But look at the difference in symbolism and feeling. Instead of candles, the dominant symbol became the vibrant, multicultural K-pop light sticks, often specific to particular fan groups, alongside coordinated fan chants and popular K-pop music being played. This also created a fundamentally different atmosphere, incredibly lively, energetic, almost festival-like at times, yet still focused on the political demands. It was unifying, but through a method that oddly blended protests with contemporary cultural expression. So we can see a distinct shift from the quiet determination symbolized by candlelight to the energetic, culturally infused mobilization significantly by K-pop light sticks and K-pop anthems. This change in aesthetic and mood is central to understanding the current phase of activism we are discussing today. Moving ahead. So we saw the visual shift with light sticks, but specific K-pop songs also became powerful anthems during the recent protests between last December and this April, demanding democracy and President Yoon's removal. So let's look at the three key examples that really resonated with the crowd. First, Girls' Generation icon debut song, Into the New World from 2007. With its string harmony and heartful lyrics of encouragement, this track already carried the weight of a protest anthem. It gained prominence during the 2016 Eva University's protest and the Park Geun-hye's impeachment rallies. Its enduring message of unity and hope for a better world echoed strongly again over the past 4 months. Next, Time of Our Life by the band called Day 6, released in 2019. This track celebrates the value of the present and shared hope with the signature refreshing rock sound. Often played at festivals, its bold message about making the present unforgettable, its youthful energy and its easy sing-along quality quickly made it quite crowd favorite and the impeachment release. And the third, G-Dragon's 2013 hit Crocked demonstrate powerfully chanted its opening line, line, "Nothing lasts forever," finding courage and solidarity. The song's catchy melody, blending punk rocks and rap, sparked mass sings along, adding an emotionally charged energy to the gatherings. These are just three prominent examples highlighted during the recent turmoil. Of course, apart from these three, there were several other K-pop songs frequently heard at the protests, including recent hits like Blackpink's Apat, and others by artists like Shine, BTS, aespa, all contributing to the unique soundtrack of this movement. Moving ahead, one of the important part of my presentation, as we have seen the shift in the protest atmosphere, a crucial element driving this and connecting directly to the K-pop phenomena is young women's highly visible leadership and participation. Following President Yoon's martial law declaration, women, specifically those in their 20s and 30s, really emerged as a core demographic in the ensuing protest. The numbers bears this out at the large demonstration near the National Assembly on December 7th, 2024, which drew an estimated 325,000 people. Data indicated that these young women made up roughly one-third of the entire crowd. This is quite significant because historically, large-scale protests in South Korea were often seen as predominantly male spaces. We are now witnessing young women stepping forward, leading the charge, bringing fresh energy and undoubtedly a diverse perspective to these movements. What motives this strong participation? Evidence strongly suggests it's fueled by resistance to President Yoon's policies and rhetoric perceived as anti-feminist. A key example frequently cited is his pledge and subsequent actions toward abolishing the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, alongside other statements that caused significant backlash among women. Crucially for our topic today, these young women are the ones largely credited with reshaping the protest cultural we have been discussing. They're actively merging their political dissent with the familiar symbols and energy of K-pop fandom, bringing the light stakes and music and transforming the atmosphere of these political rallies. And this hasn't gone unnoticed. Observers consistently highlight the political awareness of and cultural creativity shown by these young women, often pointing to their active engagement as a positive and hopeful sign for the future dynamism of South Korean democracy. So we have established that K-pop became central to this protest, particularly among young women and youth. But the crucial question is, why does it works so effectively in this context? What makes K-pop resonate as a tool for activism? So firstly, there's the power of energizing music and lyrics. K-pop tracks often have an electrifying beat, high energy that helps maintain momentum and morale during long demonstrations. Beyond the rhythm, the lyrics, even if not originally political, frequently convey a message of purpose, togetherness, hope, and perseverance through difficult times, themes that naturally align with the sentiments of a protest movement. And secondly, K-pop creates a transformative atmosphere and visual spectacle. The most obvious example is the sea of iconic, colorful light sticks, each often representing a different artist or fandom. This instantly turned protest sites into vibrant, multicultural musical rallies. This generates a uniquely engaging atmosphere, sometimes described as resembling a club dance floor, which can make participation feel more dynamic and less daunting, effectively merging protest with familiar cultural expression. Finally, K-pop also allows for a powerful connection between identity and action. For many participants, specifically younger generation, reacting to specific issues like feminist policies, being a K-pop fan is a core part of their identity. Using K-pop in this protest enable them to link their cultural identity directly with their political voice and participation in acts of resistance, bringing their whole sleeves to the movement. These elements combine the music, the visuals, the organized community, and the identity connection help explain why K-pop has become such a potent and defining feature of contemporary protest here in South Korea. To really grasp the significance of K-pop in this protest, it helps to view it through an interdisciplinary lens. This isn't just about politics or music alone, it's a phenomena that uniquely blends several distinct domains. We see popular entertainment merging with highly dedicated fan culture, which in turn fuels effective community organizing. Think of the rapid information sharing and logistical support managed via social media. And all of this gets channeled into very potent political expression, like the clear pushback against anti-feminist stances we observed. Now, the scale and visibility were particularly striking recently. This intersection of K-pop and protest isn't entirely precedented here in South Korea. As mentioned earlier, the songs had already become an anthem for Women's University student during the 2016 protest. K-pop has also been a visible element at events like Seoul Cultural Festival, showing its relevance in various social contexts within South Korea. But the impact extends far beyond our borders, demonstrating significant global activist resonance. K-pop fan communities worldwide have shown that they can be powerful forces in social movements. For example, in the United States, back in 2020, K-pop fans from many ethnic and gender minority backgrounds actively contributed to the Black Lives Matter movement through impressive online fundraising campaigns and coordinated hashtag activism that often flooded out opposing messages. In Chile in 2021, we saw a coalition of K-pop fans organize a significant online campaign to support the progressive presidential candidate Gabriel Boric, who went to win the election. And lastly, and more broadly, numerous reports highlight how K-pop fandoms globally often serve as a virtual safe spaces and supportive communities for LGBTQ plus individuals. So drawing this together, while South Korea rightly honors its deep historical history of protest music, including the powerful legacy of Minjungayo, it's undeniable that K-pop now represents a powerful, new, and likely central force in these landscapes. It's defining the sound and strategy for the current generation of musical protesters, adding a dynamic layer to the ongoing struggle for democracy and social justice. So to bring everything together, what can we conclude from this analysis? First, it is clear that K-pop has fundamentally transformed, especially visible in the protests surrounding President Yoon's impeachment following the events of the last December. It has shifted from being primarily entertainment to becoming a truly potent symbol and effective tool for political mobilization here in South Korea. This has cultivated a new protest culture. The quieter symbols, like the candles of 2016, are now often complemented or even replaced by the sounds of K-pop anthems and the vibrant visual display of light sticks. This create uniquely dynamic, engaging, almost concert-like atmospheres at the rallies, effectively blending activism with familiar cultural expression. We also seen that youth and women are clearly at the rim of this shift. Younger generations, particularly women, are leveraging the built-in organizational power of K-pop fan culture and are actively responding to specific political grievances through this means. Crucially, K-pop is acting as a powerful bridge connecting cultural identity with political participation. For many, it makes activism feel more accessible, emotionally resonant, and culturally relevant, potentially drawing in individuals who might not connect with more traditional protest forms. And finally, the enduring significance of this cannot be understated. This phenomena vividly highlights the growing power of popular culture to actively shape political discourse and mobilize collective action in our contemporary digital age. K-pop's recent role demonstrate how music and fandom are not just reflecting society, but can become visual instrument of amplifying voices, building solidarity, and fundamentally reshaping the landscape of social change here in South Korea. Oh, thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate your time, and I would be glad to take any questions and suggestions you might have. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Maud, for this is also very timely research, right? So let us discuss something more later. This
Sure.
time, we will meet the last presenters today. So we will meet Luis Banzuela and Sofia de Guzman from the University of the Philippines Diliman. Their research is entitled "The Koreans in the Eyes of the Filipinos: Understanding Filipino and Korean Representation in Local Media and Literature." So Luis and Sofia, you're ready.
Good evening to everyone. Am I audible po?
Yes.
Okay, thank you po. Thank you po, Doc Be. Okay, good evening once again to everyone. I am Luis Nazir A. Banzuela, and with me is my partner, Sofia Erica C. de Guzman, and we are from the College of Arts and Letters of the University of the Philippines Diliman. And for tonight, we will be presenting our paper entitled "The Koreans in the Eyes of the Filipinos: Understanding Filipino and Korean Representation in Local Media and Literature." Now, before anything else, we would like to share that this paper came into fruition during a jeepney ride to SM North EDSA. The traffic had me and my partner talking about life, including our interest in Filipino and Korean culture and media. It led us to talking about our personal observations, then the question, why are Filipinos and Koreans represented a certain way? Now, historically speaking, the connection between the Filipinos and Koreans can be traced back to the 8th century. This continued relationship between the two countries translated into diplomatic action, such as the Philippine Expeditionary Forces or PEFTOC, cultural influences such as food and dances, and was further intertwined in our literature and our daily media. With the rising popularity of Hallyu since the early 2000s, Korean popular culture and media have greatly captured the interest and love of the Filipinos. The nuances in this representation, however, may have some influence on how people view and perceive another country's culture. Like what was stated in the policy brief of the media coverage of South Korea and the Philippines, the continuous media exposure that was made greatly easier in this age of globalization does not exactly guarantee a positive image. Pia?
So as mentioned, partner, our conversation led to this shared curiosity about what Filipinos think about local and foreign culture depicted on screen and in reality. We had a flurry of questions, but we came to the main research question being, from an intercultural standpoint, how do such depictions in media and literature influence the perspectives of Filipinos of Korean culture and society? And in answering our main problem, we devised three main objectives, which Nazir will enlighten you on right now.
Now, these papers' objectives are the following. First is to describe the perspectives of Filipinos on Koreans and Korean culture. Second is to understand the roots of these interpretations as taken from media, literature, and other social cultural influences. And finally, it is to distinguish how the effects of these perspectives shape the Filipino social cultural experience. Pia?
Now, moving on to the methodology. So, given the social-cultural nature of our paper, we took a qualitative approach as our main method to accommodate and best describe the Filipino perspective and cultural context shared by our participants. In gathering data, we constructed a qualitative questionnaire using Google Forms as our primary instrument, along with a series of interviews with some of the participants' sites. The form itself consists of a series of rate scale, multiple choice, and mostly open-ended questions regarding their perspectives by the perspectives of Filipinos influenced by Korean representation in media literature. And originally, all of these were written in Filipino since this was originally a paper for a subject using the Filipino language. Now, this study's participants were young Filipino adults aged 19 to 27, with a total of 22 respondents who submitted their insights through the Google Forms. In analyzing the data, a thematic analysis was conducted to identify significant patterns and insights from the participants' experiences and perspectives. And from the overall analysis, the results were categorized into three major themes, mainly first, the individual experience, second, the influence of media as a medium, and third, the influence of culture and modern society. So now we discuss the results of our paper. Now, for the first theme, which is the individual experience, the first theme tackles insights gathered from the participants regarding their history, formal introduction, and basically when they first came to light or knowledge of Korean culture, and the Hallyu phenomenon in general. It was discovered that many young Filipinos are familiar with the concept of Hallyu and Korean culture and were introduced to them in various ways. Now, a majority of the participants mentioned how exposure to Korean media, specifically K-pop and K-drama, and even citing some examples for K-pop groups such as BTS, 17 Twice, and some famous K-dramas such as Weightlifting Fairy, Kim Bok-ju, Goblin, were just some of the stepping stones for them to get into Hallyu culture. However, some Filipinos have discovered Hallyu through other means. Some of them were first introduced to Hallyu and Korean culture through their friend groups that they met in school, outside of school, through other members of the community as well. And a few of them even noted how through their other hobbies and interests that are outside of media had first introduced them to Hallyu culture. Some notable examples are through the gaming community. Some have mentioned them being part of the gaming community since Korean teams such as SK Telecom or T1 are some very well-known teams in the International Esports Championships. Now, one participant even mentioned first being introduced to Koreans and Korean culture because of their parish patron saint, Saint Andrew Kim Tae-gon, who was a missionary who resided in the Philippines and is considered the first South Korean Catholic saint. So, moving on to the influence of media.
Now, to further draw out the experiences of our respondents, our questions in the Google Forms were rooted in whether or not these experiences, their observations, and their exposure reflect a positive or a negative image for both Filipinos and Koreans. In the recent study of Meltwater and We Are Social, Filipinos remain ranked as the number one internet users globally. And through the process of writing this paper, we found out that Hallyu was further promoted through the rise of new technology and online platforms such as YouTube and TikTok. Respondents also shared that they rely on social media platforms such as X, which was formerly known as Twitter, and other free sites that does not particularly need a subscription in order to gain access to these Korean medias. The Korean media's production quality was greatly praised. However, the stark contrast between the Filipinos and Koreans can be seen despite the fact that idealistic representation of both of the countries were very much present. There is romanticization in how they present South Korea and a negative image usually for the Filipinos, presenting them as a poor country and dweller of drug deals. However, Filipinos are known for their talents as well as being hardworking. These representations come from their own personal experiences. Now, to discuss the influence of culture and modern society, my partner will be doing so.
And for our final theme or for our final results, we gathered details and experiences from the interactions of the participants with Hallyu or Korean culture beyond literature and media. From what we've gathered, their real-life experiences of cultural nuances can vary either through direct contact, such as interacting with a native Korean, or visiting or traveling to South Korea, or even indirectly interacting with Korean culture from an outsider perspective, such as through the experiences of peers and other social groups, or from even their Korean language classes offered by their learning institutions. Now, it's noted that both positive and negative experiences were expressed. A majority of the participants um, have shared that they have shared their positive experiences, such as Koreans mostly being nice, accommodating, and even helpful to foreigners, which was one of these insights, while some quoted some negative experiences, such as some of them being closed off, not being as warm, and mostly being introverted or isolated, as observed by the participants themselves or by people they know. And despite their fascination and interest in Hallyu culture, Filipinos still remain critical and aware of certain societal issues and racial disparities that shape their perspectives, as shared by the participants. Young Filipinos, especially those part of idol fandoms in the Philippines, do continue to promote their favorite Korean idol groups and bond over their favorite artists, but also take to cultural learning through online community engagement and discourse. Reflecting on such interactions has also made young Filipinos who consume content and information on Hallyu and Korean society emphasize the practice of becoming more critical of biases and certain stereotypes imposed on both Koreans and Filipinos that are shaped, promoted, and sometimes even distorted by media depictions. Moreover, young Filipinos continue to look to intercultural learning and engaging in other cultures as a means of understanding one's own. Some of the participants quote the success of the idol and entertainment industry, but with it, the perpetuation of misogyny and stereotypes, treatment towards women, and the rise of the 4B feminist movement, as mentioned by some of the participants. It also entails knowing that we can learn from them and not just become blind enjoyers or consumer of such things. Some Filipinos also note how both countries have benefited from bilateral relations. K-pop in itself is inspiring the dynamic revolution of P-pop in the entertainment industry and showcasing Filipino talent. South Korea also contributes to the tourism sector, which helps the Philippine economy, and even exchange student programs are contribute and lead to intellectual and cultural exchange between the two countries. So, in conclusion,
As we go back to this paper's objectives, the researchers were able to gather that one, even though the Filipinos admire Korean culture, they acknowledge that the media bring forth stereotypes that may affect the two countries' relationship. Number two, the Filipino youth have a deeper connection to Korean culture because of their personal experiences and exposures, which affects their perspectives on it. And number three, the promotion of ties between Filipino Korean culture needs balance, consideration, and assessment from both countries. Overall, we have come to see that admiring and critiquing go hand in hand when it comes to the young Filipino adults who are fans of both Korean media and Korean culture. The researchers see this paper and data gathered as a great addition to further intercultural and media studies in the Philippines, particularly in this specific demographic. Once again, I am Luis Nazir Ibanzuela,
and I am Sofia de Guzman,
and we
and we
would
would
like
like
to
to thank
thank you
you for
once
your
again for your time. Good evening.
Thank you very much, Luis and Sophia, for interesting and also very realistic study you conducted. So let us now hold the second set of open forum. So can we call Daeun, Yujong, Maud, and Luis and Sophia? So all of you can turn on your camera if you can, so you can see each other and we can also answer the questions from audience. Sophia can turn off the slides, or Luis. Yes, so we had four very different, very diverse topics in this set of presentations. So if anyone has questions or comments, feel free to raise. Shall we start with Dr. Kim?
Right, thank you. So I very much enjoyed your presentation. So actually the various topic attract, I think, very interesting attention as well. So I just follow the order of the presentation. The Daeun Kim actually, she's under my supervision, but I understood that she's at the very early stage, but even considering that early stage, you need to improve that kind of the theoretical and the conceptual frameworks and even the structures of your abstracts. And you have to put the many ideas, but it doesn't really followed by the kind explanation, the what factors, how they are related and interrelated, especially the to what extent then identity that matters when it comes to admission of the Timor-Leste. You can talk later individually in person. And Yu Jung's the presentation, though I'm not such the I don't have the expertise in that field, but I'm just curious that Red Plus is not only about the market transactions, but it seems that your research and when it comes to measure of the success that you, it seems that very narrowly focusing on that the financial metric may not really considers the equally equity and sustainability and the local ownership and so on. So I'm just wondering that how you can make a kind of the balance between the market efficiency and the procedural justice and so on. And then Muhammad Bilal, I think it's very interesting to hear from non-Korean scholars about the witness and observing the current political dynamics in Korea. So, all right, so many people are they're very much impressive with that kind of the new kind of the model and the performance and then the appearance in the protest, right? But when it comes to analysis, so you emphasize that your study is based on the interdisciplinary approaches, but I don't really see that then your interdisciplinary approach is operated in detail in your explanations and so on, right? And then also, it's not so clear that how, then through what mechanisms that the K-pop translate into kind of the activism. So, are you going to have a kind of another round of the collection of the empirical data, such as the interviews and then surveys and so on? That would be a great benefit for your research as well. And Luis and then Sophia. So it's also very interesting then that we should concern how the Koreans, the Hallus, and K-pop are consumed, not only consumed and then perceived from the other countries' citizens' perspective. So while I agree with your conclusion, but before reach to conclusion, your categorization into the three the pillar, let's say the individual opinions and media influence and societal influence, but it's not so really clearly explained that how you make this category, then how you how you can relate the categorization with somehow theoretical framework. But anyhow, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kim. We can receive other questions first, so everyone can have other responses later.
I'll go next, Professor Vic.
Yes, please.
Okay. So for my comments, first I'll just go with the same order as well of the presentation. So the first one is for Dan. I'm wondering, well, I don't know, I may have missed it, but is this like your thesis or just working independently, like a paper for a class?
Oh, I just start to write my thesis.
Oh, sorry.
I just start to write my thesis, so it's not clearly directly. Yeah.
I see. Okay. Because I asked that question because I'm wondering if in writing this research, if you have a specific portion that kind of discusses the ASEAN as a regional organization. I ask that because I think it's very important that when you analyze Timor-Leste's wanting to enter the ASEAN organization is to have an understanding and an explanation of what the ASEAN first is in terms of a regional organization. Because you have questions, for example, of like, what do they want to gain from being part of the ASEAN organization? Like, what are the things that they are looking for in this? And you will be able to answer that if you have a discussion of what ASEAN is first and what it is not. Because I think here you will find the problematic things about ASEAN as a regional organization. So for example, I have read some things about the Timor-Leste wanting to enter ASEAN. For example, there might be a gap between what they hope to achieve as part of the ASEAN region but actually the ASEAN region doesn't offer these things. So I'll give you an example. For example, peace and stability. So one of the things that they're saying is that they want to be part of this organization for cohesion, peace, and stability. But in fact, the ASEAN region is quite problematic in terms with dealing with peace and stability, because the decision making within the region in terms of all the conflicts, it's not there. We don't operate the same way as, for example, the other regional organization like the EU. And so if what they want to get out of this organization is, oh, it's going to help us with peace, they're probably not going to get it. Because as an example, the Myanmar crisis, the ASEAN is quite hands-off, because part of the formula of the ASEAN region is that they don't dictate. They don't make decisions. They don't enter into this kind of political decisions with other regions. That's why a lot of people are saying ASEAN is kind of like a show. It's just a show as a regional organization. So that's why I think you need to include a bit of that discussion, because that will definitely help you with explaining later and analyzing Timor-Leste's case in wanting to enter the organization. Okay, so that's one. So that's for Dion. For you, Jung, I would just like to point out, I appreciate how you included in your presentation your reason for choosing this case and why Cambodia. I think this goes for all the students. It's very important that when we do research, especially in qualitative research, that we have a good rationale and an explanation of choosing a particular case. Because it could be any case, right? But what is the uniqueness, or what is it about this country? What is it about this phenomenon? What is it about this medium that is very important that you saw, okay, I need to focus on this one. I need to look at Timor-Leste because it's in this region, it's quite different in terms of culture, in terms of economic background, but it wants to join ASEAN. That's very interesting. So in Yujong's case, you shared that in Cambodia, they are, this particular country out of the ASEAN region is more active, right? In RED plus, okay? I can attest to that when looking at the Philippines case, because this is something that we don't usually hear. So I would just like to point out the importance of kind of putting out the rationale for analyzing a particular case that gives your research more grounding and also sets the importance of why you're looking at a particular case and why this particular country or this particular program. So that's more of just like a general comment, Yuzang. Okay. And then for Maud and Sophia and Louise, your research or your studies are quite similar in the sense that they revolve around how culture impacts consciousness on certain issues. So for example, political change, stereotypes, and racial discrimination and all these things, which I think is even more important to look into in the age of social media, because we see everything. We see all sorts of movements. We have access to what's happening in terms of how different nations act on certain issues. So I just want to just kind of comment on that and how this one is very important. However, just a suggestion to make your studies stronger, since you didn't include, so I'm not aware if you have this or you weren't able to include it in your presentation, is a theoretical framework to help you in, we use theories, especially in qualitative research, to guide us in our analysis. So especially in qualitative research, we need to pull on something when we want to explain a phenomenon. So I think it will do well for your cases to have theoretical frameworks. So for example, you can look at critical theory, cognitive dissonance theory for Sophia and Louise. So for example, because cognitive dissonance theory at the very basic level is about having kind of a an idea, a belief, but then looking in reality, oh, there's a difference. So that's why we have the dissonance aspect. So you can look at this one, maybe also feminist theory, for example, for Maud, in terms of how he pointed out earlier how Iwa Women's University led as a women's university, and even to this day, they are very strong in terms of protesting and in terms of voicing their concerns. And they do use these aspects of the Korean culture and K-pop. So try to look at what might be the theories that will fit perfectly with your cases and what you are analyzing, and that will make your research stronger. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think each presenter can give some response to Dr. Kim and Dr. Aurora's comments and questions. Anyone can start.
I really appreciate Dr. Kim and Dr. Aura. It will be very helpful for me. And actually, it's my third semester of my MA. So it's still starting process now in my case. So it was very thankful to Professor Kim and Dr. Aura. So thank you.
Yes, Maud?
Shall I? Yeah. Thank you, Professor. First, I will thank you, Professor Kim, for your insights and suggestions. So I appreciate your highlights on need of the interdisciplinary method. But in this presentation, I primarily focused on presenting the key findings and phenomena itself, rather than going into the specific of the integration and analytical frameworks. But I will try my best to look into that, and uh, uh, for my methodology and insights, I've used some political specific context and also cultural studies and media studies to analyze the meaning and functions of the K-pop groups, songs, and the symbols, like the light sticks, as I mentioned in my presentation. But yeah, thanks for your suggestion. I will look into that, and thank you, Professor Aurora, for your insights and questions. And also, like as you mentioned, I haven't like looked into the framework of the research, so I will definitely look into that as well. Thank you for your insights. I really appreciate it.
Okay, Yujong or Sophia? Yes, Sophia first.
Good evening, Dr. We very much really appreciate you, and we thank you for your insights as well. This paper was actually for, I mean, for context, this was a paper for our subject, academicong research. Like, it's basically research, but it's sa orientasyon Filipino. It's supposed to be in like a Filipino context. So most of the theories that are like for Western standards, it was sort of, I wouldn't say discouraged, but we were more encouraged to try and develop a research method that was more that catered to more Filipino, like incorporating Filipino values, like Psikologiyang Filipino. It was interesting that you also like uh sort of brought up in your own like dissertation, like the concepts of kapwa, paikisama. So those were the things that we were sort of integrating, and that's why we didn't really have a theory. But I understand why that also became a problem, like because that wasn't able to really translate as much, I guess, as well to our findings. And as well, I guess that also goes to Professor Kim's comment in terms of like the categories or how we like um designated like the different themes. There wasn't really any clear connection as well. But we really thank you for your comments. And in terms of like the theory, cognitive dissonance theory, that's also a really interesting concept, and we'll try to like integrate that as well. So yes, thank you so much.
Lastly, Yujung.
Thank you for your kind comments, Professor Kim and Dr. Aura. Actually, I think the reason I choose Cambodia is because Red Plus is basically a proxy-based structure. So I think from my perspective, I think it's really hard to make the good outcome because of the structure problem. So I need to add this opinion to my article. Now I can understand that. And then thank you for your helpful opinion.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. The first set of presenters, and then the current until the last presenter. So as we listen to each other, and we also had very valuable comments from professors and colleagues. So I think everyone realizes that we should now look forward to the progress of each of your study. And then like imagine Dawn will go to Timor-Leste and then conduct the real interviews. And then she will bring so much stories, and then she can share next time. Not just Dawn, but everyone can really have different nature of data and then different approaches. So hopefully today's workshop was somewhat a gateway to go back to your interest and then research. So we can have you once again in another venue in the future. So and also very thankful for each of you because you were very punctual. So we are finishing on the dot. So thank you so much for keeping your time and sharing as much as possible the analysis part. And our special thanks, of course, goes to Dr. Kim and then Dr. Song, who always accommodate our request to co-host this NextGen Koreanist Workshop. So this year's workshop is still virtual, but hopefully we can also have Yonsei students over to Manila, and then we can also visit their campus in the future. So let us wrap up and we can keep in touch, and we will just look forward to each of your future. 감사합니다. salamat po.
감사합니다.
Thank you
salamat
very much.
po.
감사합니다.
고생 많으셨습니다.
감사합니다.
감사합니다.